talk about shipping hazardous materials to and within the state of Alaska. The first thing to remember is that the transport of hazardous materials by air or over the highway is regulated by the United States Department of Transportation. The second layer of regulations that you have to deal with are the air carriers themselves. And it doesn't matter whether it's a cargo carrier or whether it's a commercial air transporter such as an airline or a commuter service or even a bush pilot air service within the state of Alaska. They all have different standards and potentially have rules that you need to be aware of. First off, you're not able to transport any hazardous materials through the Postal Service. So if you have a shipment of gear that you need to send to Alaska or to transport within the state of Alaska, you're not allowed to ship anything that's considered hazardous materials by the Department of Transportation using the U.S. Postal Service. So bear that in mind when you're packing your gear. If you're going to ship through the USPS, you need to make sure that there's no hazardous materials involved. Second, as far as particular hazmat items that you're likely to encounter on an Alaska hunting trip or a fishing trip or some kind of remote backcountry trip, obviously stove fuel would be one. Anything used to light a stove, bear spray, the pepper spray would be considered a hazardous materials, as well as firearms ammunition. So let's talk about a few of those items real quickly here. First of all, matches or anything used to start a fire. This is a box of Strikes Anywhere matches. If you can even still find these, they are prohibited from air transport on all forms of transportation. So the airlines are not going to accept Strikes Anywhere matches either in your carry-on bag or as checked luggage. So you might as well scratch those off your list. We can no longer use those in Alaska. You cannot ship them by air freight either, and so you're kind of out of luck with Strikes Anywhere matches. Butane lighters for your stove. These are commonly used out in the field. I like them on my hunting trips because they're really quiet to operate. I just turn it on and a couple of clicks I've got a flame. The striker that comes on a Coleman stove, on a Coleman propane stove, is really loud. It lets off a loud metallic clang. So on a hunting trip I don't really like to use that because it's too noisy. So the butane lighters are really handy, but you have to declare them as hazmat. In most cases, if you're transporting a hazardous material, whether it's a butane lighter or anything, it has to be in its original factory container. So a used butane lighter, the carriers are probably not going to accept that. You need a brand new one in its original package. So be aware of that. And that package has to have DOT markings on it. It has to have a DOT label. This is a classic example of a container that you can ship by air cargo that has the DOT markings on it. This is a Coleman brand propane cylinder. There are other aftermarket brands that do not carry the DOT markings on them, and the carriers will not accept them. So before you ship your propane cylinders, you need to look at the packaging and make sure it carries the appropriate DOT designator, otherwise the carrier won't accept it. Propane cylinders like this. This is a small propane bottle that we might take on a float trip. Couple of things on those. Obviously they can be filled before you fly them out. But where the valve is, this one just has a plastic cap. Most carriers are not going to allow this container to travel unless it has a brass plug installed in the valve. So make sure you stop by your propane dealer and pick up a brass plug and put that in there. You usually have to install it with a crescent wrench, so obviously you're going to need a wrench out in the field, so make sure you have a way to get that plug out, otherwise you're going to have a bottle full of propane and no way to use it. So it needs to have that installed and you're good to go. Ammunition, another one that gets asked about quite a bit. It's not really a problem as far as the DOT is concerned. You can actually travel with ammunition in your checked luggage as a passenger on a commercial airliner. However, every air carrier has different restrictions in terms of how much ammunition you're allowed to take. On Alaska Airlines currently it's 50 pounds per passenger. That's quite a bit of ammunition. The reason why we have that standard for Alaska Airlines is because a lot of people that live here come into Anchorage from the bush, and they stock up on ammunition for the season. So they're allowed to take a lot of ammunition in their checked luggage. The stipulation on ammunition is it has to be in the original factory carton or in a container that's designed to carry ammunition. So, for example, Case Logic makes a series of plastic cases that are designed for ammunition. And if you're shooting reloads, you might want to pick up one of those. One thing that they absolutely will not allow are loose rounds of ammunition just floating around in your pockets or in your bag somewhere in the bottom of a bag or in a side pocket or something. The reason for that is because obviously at some point the primer could be impacted and the cartridge could go off in shipment. So ammunition has to be either in its original factory carton or in a container designed to carry ammunition. And then a final item that I might mention has to do with MREs. A lot of hunters are starting to use MREs out in the field. Those are the military rations. Some of those rations come with a heat packet that's activated by water, and the airlines generally will not allow you to ship those in your luggage. Now, you can ship those as cargo, but the reason why you can't ship them as checked luggage is because the carriers really don't know how many heat packets you have in your luggage and how many the next passenger has, and so on and so forth. So we could potentially end up with too many heat packets in the belly of the aircraft. If there was a liquid spill in the belly, the cartridges could, or the heat packets could create enough heat to create a flame source in the aircraft, and now we've got a fire in the cargo compartment of the aircraft and no way to put it out. Most carriers have a halon extinguisher system in the belly that could potentially do that, but they just don't want to take the risk, and so you're not allowed, in terms of most carriers, will not allow you to take MREs that have the heat packet in them in your checked luggage. You're going to have to ship those as air freight, and you'll have to declare that heat packet as a hazardous material. Now, when it comes to shipping hazardous materials, whether you're shipping it by cargo carrier or as on a passenger airline, there's some paperwork you're going to have to fill out. You're going to have to declare all of the hazardous materials in your shipment. So my recommendation is that when you pack your stuff, separate all that hazmat out into a separate container and then take that down to your air carrier. In some cases, the carrier may require you to repack certain items because they have to be packaged according to DOT regulatory requirements. So you want to check with your carrier, make sure that you know what the standards are, and then when you show up with your freight, it'll be packaged appropriately. Now, all commercial airlines are going to charge you a hazmat fee. In fact, the cargo carriers are going to charge you a hazmat fee as well. So it's good to know how much that fee is. Right now, I think it's running around 50 bucks, but it's probably going to go up just like everything else does. So it doesn't matter whether you have one match or a whole pallet of Coleman gas. The hazmat fee is a flat rate. So if you have more than one group going up to Alaska at the same time, you could aggregate all your hazmat together. If you're using an expediter, that's what they're going to do. They're going to aggregate shipments, and so they can save on that hazmat fee. So be aware that you will have a hazmat fee for any hazardous materials that you're shipping out to the field. Consequently, if you don't have very much hazmat, i.e. you've just got maybe 4 or 5 of these little propane disposables, or you've got a butane lighter, or a few little items like that, you might be able to pick those up out in the village that you're flying out of. On a lot of hunting trips, you might be chartering your bush flight out of a village, for example, Bethel or Nome or Kotzebue or someplace like that. So it's possible, since all of those places have grocery stores and variety stores, you might be able to pick up your hazardous materials out there in the bush. The best way to know about that is to either use a hunt planner, or you could use a air charter service that provides an expediting service. So call your air charter or call your hunt planner and ask them what's available in the village, and they can get you directed so that you don't arrive without the items that you need.